My name is Jamari Cannon, and this is the Highest Investment Podcast. So, the first time I did counseling was some premarital counseling that we did before we got married, and it was really good. The initial response was like resistive. I didn't think that it was like a necessary thing, but it turns out that it was really beneficial for us. I didn't think there was like a lot of problems ahead of us getting married, so I didn't think there was like a need to go to counseling. It seemed like something like you do for fixing problems. But even if there aren't problems, it seems like it's the type of thing that, one, I think there were some of those underlying problems for us, but I think even if there aren't any problems, it's the type of thing that if you have the professional support to do it, that can really like help create space and make for a better, relationship dynamic in a number of ways. And so for us, it really did help to have someone else in the room. One of my thoughts was, if I'm going to marry this person, why would I need someone else to be involved in a conversation for us to like get to any sort of understanding or any better place? Because what can you as a stranger add to what we already have after years of being together? But surprisingly, a lot. It's sometimes you're too close to a problem to kind of see it, kind of a thing in a relationship sense. So objective perspective, a neutral party that you can like really bounce things off of and not sort of be too invested in it emotionally or personally to actually get to meaningful resolutions, and also just someone to see the patterns that are just like patterns that you weren't present to. It was one of the things that made our period of relating to each other right before getting married one of the best periods of our relationship, before that like initial glow period that you have when everyone's brand new to each other. So it was really, really helpful and really good, and I would recommend it. It was beneficial for us, and I didn't even like it going into it. I presently hold a high regard for therapy and counseling work, so I have no resistance. But in the past, it's come, like I said before, it's come from like just different places where how is a stranger going to really help me get to a better place of understanding with someone that I know and that knows me really well? So like that was like one of the one of the resistances I had with it. It's also been things that I just didn't want to have some. I didn't want to ask for help. I thought I kind of had it, and it's like looking back on it, clearly I didn't have it. Like it's definitely something that I felt have to be admitting. Sometimes it's okay to admit something's wrong without thinking that something's wrong with you. And there one, I didn't hold that distinction at the time, but like I gained that. But at the time, also, you just gotta admit when something's not right, and doing that takes a certain level of accountability, and that can be tough. So I think that was a part of my initial resistance in the times that I've gone to counseling or therapy. Quite frankly, being cheap. Just like, why would I pay all this money per hour for somebody to talk to, right? Like, I could talk to plenty of people, but I talk to my friends or people that I'm, like in my family that I'm close with, and the level of conversation isn't going to be necessarily to the depth of a therapist. They're not going to have the same sort of skill set to sort of uncover things, or just sort of like, tools, or I don't want to say it in a bad way, but tricks to really help you get to see things like communication or patterns of behavior or your own sort of disconnection from reality the same. Like my good friend or a relative of mine may not have that in their at their disposal to like help get to a better understanding, whereas they might be very sympathetic and listen. But like listening to my problem is a great way of venting and getting me some like great expression, and I'm not shunning that, but like there's another level of like resolution and betterment that someone's with trained experience and understanding how people's behavior and patterns are over years and time might be able to bring to the table that your homeboy, your homegirl, or your cousin, whomever, might not be able to do. So for me, it was just like this sort of idea of like, why would I be paying all this money to talk to someone? But like, it's worth it. And so it's like, part of it was that. And there was also it wasn't like there was a lack of belief in it, but I didn't think that there were things with me, right? Like as I saw myself, having an argument with someone is a normal behavior. But like, so how I see myself, there's nothing that I need to do because people are, people behave where we have arguments. But I think that if you set aside what is, just like, okay, occasionally I have an argument at the rate of, once a month, whatever it is, I don't know. Okay, that's cool, but like, what if you could have a state of being that was much better than that, right? And it isn't to say that counseling or therapy is going to solve all of your problems. It's not that. It's not a magic wand, but there's potential for a better state. And I think, not looking at what is and saying this is fine is needed to say I can go to something better. And so like saying like there's nothing wrong with arguing once a month. Oh yeah, but like what if every day was bliss? There's like upside, right? There's nothing wrong with this. This is fine. But what if it was better? And looking at it and saying, but it's fine, like why fix it is a limiting thing because like there's no incentive to take action. So it's like why would I go see someone when I'm good? I'm not crazy. I'm not feeling depressive or particularly bothered. I'm good. And okay, you good. Nothing is wrong with you, but like, what if it could be right? And like recognizing that and seeing the potential there, I wasn't doing that. But having done that, I'd say, my resistance was just that I wasn't looking at the upside. I was just sort of looking at the status quo and saying like, I'm good. I don't need anything. It's like, yeah, it's not about need. But what about what you would want? What about what could be better and great? And I think a lot of people would take better over okay almost any day, at least I do. So I think that those were some of the things that like held me up and like were things that, I ducked and dodged or didn't really, pursue therapy or counseling because of. I did not have a lot of examples of men doing therapy before me going into therapy. I mean, in general, it's sort of the status quo that I didn't have a lot of examples of men doing anything in my life, but it was definitely not the case where they were in those examples that I did have. They were people who would seek out professional help or therapy, and I've never heard any of them like, denigrating it. But I didn't have someone who, as a mentor or guide or an example, would say, "Oh, yeah, my uncle did this," or so and so did that, and maybe I'll talk to them about what they got from it, or it's okay for me to do it. I think the only thing I saw was the sort of stereotypical stuff you see on TV shows and movies, where it's like, oh, shrink, or they sort of badmouth the idea of getting help. There's this like stigma or notion around, getting help that like something is wrong or you've failed in some way and you can't handle it all and it's all too much for you, and it's like an admission of defeat or like a flaw that you will never be able to wash off of you, that may get painted when you only have these sort of popular culture references of like resistive to professional help people on TV shows and movies. And that was about the exposure that I had. I also saw people who would represent it as good and beneficial on TV shows and movies too, so it's not like the whole culture is bad. But no, I had no personal real examples that I could relate to of people seeking out professional help, especially men in particular, in my life. What's a raw example of something I learned about myself in therapy? Okay. So this kind of goes back to what you were just saying about examples. So I didn't grow up with a lot of men in my family. There were, my grandparents had 5 surviving daughters as children. So those my mom and my aunts. A lot of the children that they had just happened to be girls, and a few boys were born out of that generation, and I was one of them. And so just the family was a lot of women. And one thing I realized after therapy, was I have a difficult time engaging and receiving male energy in relationship dynamics. Like, and that doesn't seem like it would be the case. I was playing sports since I was very young. I'm in a fraternity. I've, been around guys in social settings in public school and in other cases outside of like my immediate family, and then had coaches as examples and mentors at a certain level. But the what you get in those relationships it hits on something very different, at least for me, than what it would have been to have a very close male relationship with a father or a really close uncle who served in that role. And those were more peers and teammates and people who would coach me professionally to play football, but not necessarily to be like a man. And that's not necessarily their role when they're a football coach of 50, 60 kids. But I learned and realized that when it came to like other relationships beyond peer and coach or something like that, I didn't receive and interact with males very well. And that the way that played out for me in life is that I would often have friendships or relationships that were only so close or so deep, because it's like to embrace you in your pain. Though it's a different thing to see a man cry. I remember seeing that one time at a funeral. It was like one of my further, my sort of distant uncles, and I remember seeing him cry at it was his father's funeral at the casket, and I was over on the side, and I then thought it was okay to cry because I saw my uncle cry. But like that example, I remember that for years before I ever, needed or grew up and gone to counseling or therapy. But like, what if my boy starts crying? Or what if I got something going on and it's worthy of me crying? Hard to necessarily do that if it's just and it differs with gender sometimes and how you feel about that. Like if my sister's crying, I'm gonna go grab her and hug her, and like same with my little nephew actually. But if my boy 20 something, I like, boy, you okay, dog? Or I might say some shit like, man, fuck you, like you too big to be crying like that. And it's like, why would I say that to him versus her? And for me, it just I didn't have an experience or familiarity in dealing with and engaging with male energy, and not just like the emotion of like negative, but like in just close personal ways. And so like I uncovered that and sensed that in therapy. And so what I then did was like, okay, well, how do I find that and get that for myself so that whatever it is that would enable in me, I have that. And I sought out people who I met that had like what I called like grandfather kind of energy to them, and just like I would just be around them and socialize with them. Now, these aren't necessarily people who sit around crying all the time, but like it's just an engagement that allows me to like know this interaction and not just be around and engaging with women in that personal sort of emotional space, or with my boys in like a friend, peer, or coach kind of like dynamic. One thing that I would really want, black men to understand from this story and this conversation would be that it's okay to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay not to be on top of it all and to be able to handle everything on a day-to-day basis. That's okay too. It isn't a failure to do that. And even when you do fail in life, that is okay too. The people who do fail, the only people who can say that they never fail are few and far between, or the people who don't do shit. Like, and it's hard to be both of those things on either end of the spectrum for different reasons. It's hard to be perfect, and it is hard to be someone who's not doing shit, because it's going to be painful to live a life like that. So to feel like you've got a difficult situation and you need some help in it, perfectly fine to feel that way and to take action to resolve that. I think that the stigma around counseling or therapy, it doesn't serve. It can be a difficult thing to get beyond, but I personally advocate for it. I no longer just look for therapy or counselors in my moments of crisis or need. I look at it as like a sort of continual thing. I go to the gym continuously. I don't just like, oh, I'm fat now, let me go to the gym and knock some pounds off and then like get fat again. I just continually would like to be fit. Well, same thing on a mental standpoint. Like there's consistently something you're experiencing in life that may take a toll on you, whether it's something from the past that you haven't resolved yet, something that you experience on a day-to-day basis. If you look at the traumas that people experience and go through, when do you actually get over that shit? You just forget it, but you don't really like let go of it. You might not be thinking of it in the moment when X happened 5 years ago, whether that be a relationship, an interaction that scarred you or left you bothered. And there's like a number of things that black men have to be dealing with that. Like, I don't know, look at any, popular culture situation that depicts like a demeaning interaction or a tough period in life or some shit like that, and like tell yourself that doesn't take a toll on a person and that person's not human. And if that isn't resolved, it's still sitting within you at some level and it's affecting you. And I'd rather be, out front with it on a personal, that's just me, on a personal level, just dealing with it and taking it on versus like letting that thing drive my behavior, which, things like that have. I've had relationships in the past that I've never really looked at and taken the assessment of like the toll that had on me, and I've just sort of like moved on to the next thing. Meanwhile, after some time, it's reared its ugly head in some other form or some other behavior where I'm like unaware that the reason I'm doing this over here is because I have this like belief that I gained from this thing over there. And wouldn't life be great if that wasn't still driving my behavior, a few years later? But I think that the ability to just like admit that is sometimes tough. Like I was telling my guy this like years ago, this like right after college, and I had like a real tough breakup after that, and didn't tell anybody about it really. People kind of figured out and knew about it eventually, but it wasn't something I ever really like owned and faced and did anything about. And we were outside of one of our friends' party, and we were talking about that, but talking kind of around it. And I remember that, and I said, the way I talk about it now is that one of the realest conversations that I ever had was that we as men don't have real conversations. And in that conversation, I didn't have the conversation about the thing that like got us there, and that was like that relationship, that pain and breakup. And I was telling him how, sometimes you look at it and see like all women are emotional, and when relationships or things go bad and they have this like they go through all this pain and suffering and they cry, but it's like they actually have it better because they have places and people where they can like do that. I don't think cry with any of my boys like that. I mean, I can recall. But I'll bet most women have cried with one of their friends, and having that conversation. Here I am dealing with some shit that I'm kind of talking around, but not really sort of saying like, hey, this is actually what I'm feeling about this whole situation. Here's how it played out. Here's what went down with that. And I'm not really getting to the heart of that because I'm still sort of like blocking my ability or my willingness to just go there with my friend, because I don't have the connection or the ability to feel like this kind of connection with someone. And so it's all in me, right? Like I'm the one trying to resolve it, not because I'm not really addressing it or seeing someone who I feel safe enough to like go there with on that stuff. Because hey, it's like, oh, your girl left you. Like, what kind of man are you? Like, why she leave you? Like, oh, you just can't. Like, what does that say about you? It's like nothing, motherfucker. But like, it does hurt, And so having somebody who can go there and say like, oh, damn, like, tell me about that. Like, what? Are you okay? Like, I'm gonna check in on you a little bit more, or like, if you need to cry, you can, in this conversation, versus like you just stopping before the emotion takes you over, and just like that's not resolved, that's still there. You ain't thinking about it, but it's still there. So that conversation was like one of the few times it almost got there for me when I was younger, where I was having like a real meaningful conversation about some shit that was going on with me that I was facing and dealing with and experiencing. But even then, we just kind of broached the idea that, we don't really go there as men. We don't really have those relationships and the connection in the relationships that we do have to express our disappointments, pains, frustrations, failures in a way that feels safe and open. We rather talk about, things like Kobe versus Jordan, LeBron versus Jordan, and shit like that, which is, a worthy discussion at a time and place, but it's not my whole life. And that's not driving my behavior. Right now, my practice of therapy is that I have a therapist, and I, in particular, sought out and waited to find, after several consultations, someone who I felt was a good feel and fit for me, who could like meet me at the level that I'm at. I wanted a black therapist and I wanted a male therapist for some of the reasons that I mentioned to you before. I wanted to be able to like go there with a dude. I think for me initially in that process, I was really seeing and sensing like, oh, it'd be easy to do this with like a woman, but like that's sort of part of my own problem is that that's the only place I am able to go there, but half the world is not women and half of the relationships I might have aren't women. So it would be great to be able to like express and show up fully in those. So I sought out a male therapist, a black therapist, and I have weekly, therapy sessions with them where it may be that I'm dealing with something either in my relationship or my own personal life, or it may just be something that is from the past or just working to like be a better me, right? Like I'm trying to get to a place and accomplish a goal. Or I keep running up against this like fear of this limitation. Or I keep hesitating on this. I keep putting this off. It's like, well, what's going on there? It really helps me just stay in regular constant contact. But it's also not just me just sort of talking at this person. I take notes on myself and that I constantly review, just like the takeaways from that I keep at the forefront of my mind about my behavior, so that it isn't just sort of like spoken into the universe and just like left to sit there and not really like acted upon, and nothing like results as a change from it. I write about myself on a regular basis in these like self-critiques, not necessarily bad critiques, but just sort of assessments of self. It's like, hey, this week I felt really just like distracted, or I really felt on, or this week this and this happened, just to really get a sense of what's going on with me. And then you can look back on it, it's like, yeah, I've been really on a run lately, or like, man, I've really been feeling this lately, or this keeps showing up. So like I really have like you call it journaling or whatever, but I just like these self-critiques that just really like capture like what's been going on with me lately, just so I can keep a really good post on like my own behavior. And then my weekly sessions and that really help to kind of like tackle both the current things that I'm dealing with, if there are issues, or any like sort of future projects or goals or things that I'm working with and dealing with and working to do. So if there were three things that I got out of my time in counseling and therapy lately, I would say that it was, someone to listen and bounce my feelings, thoughts, and ideas off of, and mirror me back to myself in a continual basis. Sometimes that's present in relationships and sometimes it's not, but it's also like a good additional person to do that with oftentimes, and I get that a lot in my own therapy sessions and relationships. And I also got a place to think, a time to reflect, and just like take some time to just not be in the moment, right? And of just like going to the next thing and going to the next thing. It's like, whoa, let's pause and like look at now. Let's look back at what's been happening. And so like that's a good time to just not be on to like, oh, what should I be doing now? What should I be doing next? Like, let's go hang out. Let's just go enjoy this, or this, work on something. And I think just a place to settle and reflect has been, what therapy's often providing for me on a daily or weekly basis. And perspective. I think that the information you get back from a therapist should be value add and great. And I think that my therapists and counselors have provided me with great perspective. I think that one of the things to keep in mind is that as you elevate and grow, is the person who you're getting your support from still at the level that you're attaining to? There should be someone whose perspective is outside of your own, so that they can be additive. And it may mean that you have this growth process of going through different therapists, because one may be suitable for now, but in 6 months it may not be.